Hi, my name is Kiruba Shankar. I'm the host of the Movers and Shakers podcast, a show where we have conversations with business leaders, CEOs, and celebrities. This is a show that I do in partnership with Hindu Business Line and BL on Campus. In this edition, we have an interesting global guest, Nami Zarringhalam. You may not recognize his name, but you'll definitely recognize the app that he founded, Truecaller. Rings a bell? Yup, this is the app that can magically figure out the name of any phone number around the world. This is the app that sounded the death knell for spammers. Recently, I got to host Huddle Kerala, one of the largest startup conventions in Asia, in Kerala, of course, and Nami was there as a keynote speaker. So I spent some time on the sidelines of the conference and we had this very interesting conversation. We talk about his entrepreneurial journey, how he scaled up, things about security and privacy, and it's a very, very interesting conversation. You should listen to it. Let's just jump straight into it. What is the genesis of how Truecaller even came about?
So it's interesting because me and Alan had this. Alan Mamedi, my co-founder, we had this problem ourselves. We were basically getting phone calls and text messages from friends and family around the world, and we were thinking to ourselves, how come we don't know who is this person texting or calling me? At least tell me which country the text or call is coming from. It's really confusing when you start to look at country codes like +91, +93, plus 961, etc. So what we wanted to do was to build a service which resembles what we can see with the directory services in Sweden, where if you go to one of the directory services in Sweden, you can actually look me up by name. And you can find my phone number. If I have a home phone number, you can find that. You can find my cell phone number, even my home address, as well as my birthday. And this is all public information in the public domain in a country like Sweden. And it creates trust, it creates transparency, and it creates dependency, where you would know that this person that you're speaking to today is not going to do something fraudulent. Is not going to disappear from the face of earth, tomorrow after I do business with you, and these kind of things, and that kind of builds trust in society, and that's what we wanted to achieve. So we started to build on Truecaller to build a service that can handle these kind of problems, but on a global scale. We launched it on this forum called XDA Forums, a forum for developers at the time, for smartphone developers. And within a week we got 10,000 downloads, and we were very excited. We started to look for investments, and basically that's where things got started.
Interesting. And when you started off this, you started along with Alan Mamedi, your co-founder, but you've already been friends, right? So this Truecaller is not the first company that both of you co-founded.
Right. So we had actually founded two other companies before Truecaller. The first one was called Möbeljakt. It was basically a search engine for home interior. The thought process here was that we had just finished university, our bachelor's degree, and during that, when we finished our degree, we moved out from our parents' places, and when we got our first apartments, you want to buy furniture, but you don't want everything to look as if it's coming straight from IKEA or the IKEA catalog. So we thought, why isn't there a service where you can, search for all these businesses online and their catalog and buy those things? Because many times they have a similar pricing as IKEA or a different design, but same price. So that's basically what we wanted to do, and that was the first business we built together. This was in 2006. And then, while we were working on Möbeljakt, in the evenings and weekends, while we had our regular jobs, Alan was working at this place where he had some bosses or managers who were not being, very kind, not being very kind to him, and so what we wanted, and every night he would come over to my apartment where we would be sitting coding for this Mavliak, and he would basically be pouring his heart out, telling me about all the crazy and horrible things that his managers did that day. And that's when we thought to ourselves, like, why isn't there a website where you can review your employer such that the next person who's going into this, going to take a job here, can review the employer just the same way the employer reviews your resume and calls your references, right? So I think that was the outset of it, and both of these problems were kind of problems that we felt, and therefore we built the service. And Truecaller is exactly the same case.
So it's interesting how you co-founded these three companies. It's easy to start ideas and start off, but it's very challenging to scale, and you hit a goldmine in Truecaller. So tell us about how, when you saw those 10,000 downloads in 1 week and you knew this is going to work, what did you do next as a way to scale it up?
So the first thing we did was we decided that we will not be engaging with the other service that we built. Jobbet we had actually already kind of sold off. So the first thing we did was decide that we're committed to Truecaller and we want to build on Truecaller.
So may I know why?
There was a couple of different reasons, but I think one of the most accurate kind of explanations of that is probably that when me and Alan first met at university, the reason we even connected was because both of us back in 2003 owned smartphones. He owned a Symbian smartphone, a Nokia Symbian smartphone, and I owned this brand called Qtech, now becoming HTC, Windows Mobile smartphone. And Alan came over to me and said, "Hey, you have this phone, can I try it out?" And I tried out his phone, and that's how we connected back in 2003. So when we saw this opportunity of smartphones and the app stores in 2009, we thought to ourselves, like, this is the perfect timing. Plus, we had this idea that we obviously had built something for, and we saw a lot of traction for. It kind of made the case really easy for us. It was a very easy decision to go with Truecaller. So that's the main kind of genesis of Truecaller.
And plus, you do not want to chase three rabbits.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you cannot chase three rabbits as an entrepreneur, or even two rabbits. You have to pick one horse that you think is the one that you want to bet on. For us, it happened to be in a domain that we very much loved. We loved the smartphones and the opportunities that it gave. We were tech kind of geeks and gadget geeks already. So we loved the domain. The opportunity was there, and it was clear that the trend, looking around the world, that this was going to be something big. It wasn't just a small thing that is going to go away in 2 years or 3 years.
Got it. Now, the downloads are great. A lot of people using it, but you can only sustain your business if you have revenues flowing in. What did you do?
So we actually experimented with monetizing the service already from the beginning. The first version of Truecaller actually costed around $7.99 USDs, and it was a one-time fee when you download the app, because you have to remember this was 2009-2010 when most apps actually cost money.
Wow.
And then slowly we started to reduce the price and realized that we earned as much money, but we got more users. And we kept decreasing the price until there wasn't anything more to decrease on. And that's actually the time in the Truecaller journey that we decided that we wanted to start to look for do a fundraising, Series A, if you will, raising money from a VC. And our chairman actually looked at us that day when we asked him, like, hey, we think we should be raising money from a VC. And he looked at us and he said, you know, your world is going to change when you take in a VC. It's not the same thing as having angel investors, seed investors, etc. You just have to be to realize that and appreciate that that's going to change. And we asked him, like, how is it going to change? And he said, you know, you won't be, I won't be able to explain it until you've experienced it. Then will you only know. But you have to realize that there is a change in terms of how what kind of expectations there will be on the company once you take this step. Are you sure you want to take this step? And we looked at each other. We said, yes, of course we want to take this step. This is the logical step for us, since we already had a product that had traction, and we knew that we could monetize on it. It was just a question of, do we want to scale, do we want to reach scale, or do we want to reach monetization, like break even first? And so, you know, taking in investors was a natural next step for us.
Did his words come true?
Yes, absolutely. Things do change when you take in VC investments, and you know, I think a lot of people have different experiences from it. We had our first Series A coming in from a Finnish VC called OpenOcean. The MySQL founder had built this fund. And they were very excited about the community that Truecaller was building. Our second round, the Series B, was from Sequoia, and it was Sequoia India who actually invested, because we had started to have this traction in India. And later on, Kleiner Perkins and Atomico came in 2014. And so, you know, all of these investors have brought different things to the table. If you take Sequoia India, for example, what they brought you know, to the table for us was it was actually associated with that investment that they did, where we did our first travel to India, and we experienced how people were using Truecaller, and they helped us with recruiting people, for instance, our VP product today. And even the product team that sits in India today, so they keep being an engaged investor and contribute in that way. And then there's also a lot of strategic partnerships, etc., where you know, having a brand like Sequoia do the introduction is you know, very beneficial to most companies, I would say. So you know, it has been a great partnership for us. I think you also have to, what the difference, I would say, is that the expectations in terms of maturity of yourselves as leaders increases, and that's a good thing for most people that can handle it. It becomes a positive thing where your own self-development actually rapidly accelerates because of you know, those partially because of those expectations, but also partially because of the opportunities that you realize that you can have if you do take the chance to develop your leadership skills.
Got it. No, brilliant answer. So between these 4 VC firms, how much money did you raise?
So in totality, between these 4 VCs, we would have raised about 80 million USDs. You know, I think one of the wise things that we did throughout the journey is every time we took in VC money, we actually made sure that we enabled our early investors, the angel investors, to do a full or partial exit. This way we were able to keep our cap table clean, which makes it easier for the next investment that's going to happen. You don't have a messy cap table with a lot of different people, you know, sitting all across the world, and where you have to collect papers and approvals and, you know, these kind of mundane tasks. And it also makes the governance of the company much easier. So that's one of the wise things that we did was 1/3 of each of those investments actually went in secondaries for those early investors, and they were obviously happy about that and about their investment because it allows them to then continue on to the next journey and do next investment, etc.
Mm-hmm. Nami, you're a computer scientist. I don't know about Alan. I'm guessing he's also DP.
Yes.
I don't think both of you had any finance background at all. So how did you figure the nuts and bolts of finance and investment?
Well, early on, I think one of the most important things that we did was we started to seek help for this, and it was actually the initial time, like I would say the first year or so of Truecaller's lifetime. It was actually Alan's wife, who's an authorized accountant, who helped us fill in the papers, sort out our taxes, etc., etc. So that was that time, and that's how we got started. I think most people would be wise to take some help, whether it's from people that you know or externally, to get that help, so you can focus on building your product, building the experience that you need to have for your users, and not think about all these other things. It does come at a cost, of course, but I think that cost is manageable as long as you're in that smaller scale.
Beautiful. Now, in your initial days of Truecaller, you had a very traumatic experience when Google kicked you out of their app store, which means your entire business model can really come crashing down your bill. So what lessons have you learned, and what advice would you give for people starting out in the platform?
Well, I think it's important to follow the guidelines and the policies that different platforms provide, and to realize as well that on the other side of these companies, there's human beings that are actually trying to make sure that the community of developers, for instance, or the app store that they're developing, that it thrives, and that's their core KPIs. And so there's a set of guidelines that they set up, and it's important that you follow them. The reason we got kicked out was simply because we had reviewed our own app several times. The reason we reviewed it was because the Play Store was in such a nascent stage. You couldn't actually comment on reviews, which you can do obviously now. But back then, we would review our own app several times every day to tell people, like, instead of writing a bad review, please email us on support and we'll help you. That was obviously against the guidelines, which was the reason why we got kicked out of the Play Store for a full year. And a lot of people became very nervous, including both me and Alan. But we decided to stay loyal to the product that we wanted to build and the experience that we wanted to give also to the Android users. So we kept developing the product, even though we were not on the Play Store. We just published it on our website. It wasn't obviously having the same growth as Android during 2012 to 2013. Had fantastic momentum, and it still continues to do. We lost out on a whole year of kind of growth throughout this period, which was, like you explained it was a traumatic experience. But at the end of the day, I think we came out of it with a bigger understanding for how these bigger giants, if you will, how they kind of work, and what our role is in that ecosystem. So I think it was a rewarding experience, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Oh, very true. And I think it's a valuable experience, and the fact that you stuck on and you showed the grit and determination. I think that's the awesome part. Now, is it true that almost all of Truecaller's growth has been organic? Is it true that you actually had zero paid advertising?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the 1 year where we spent money to acquire users was in 2012, when we spent money to acquire users in Jordan, based on that we thought that we had found our golden KPI, our golden metric, that would allow us to demonstrate that we can replicate what was happening in a similar market, Lebanon, where the penetration of Truecaller users had grown massively over a short period of time. And we wanted to replicate that in a similar market, so we spent money to acquire users, about 2,000 euros in 2012 that we spent to acquire users in Jordan. And it was successful, and with that thesis, we kind of went out to start to raise money. Obviously, we didn't continue to acquire users, because what happened was that India started to grow organically by itself. Also, I'd like to mention that the organic growth also came from that we had supported other platforms like Symbian earlier on, and these Symbian users were using Truecaller because of our partnership with Nokia. So when Nokia wasn't releasing new handsets, what these users ended up doing was getting a new Android phone. And the first application that they would download was Truecaller, and that's how we kind of started to grow really quickly, also in India.
There's a lot of apprehension about Truecaller using people's information, and consequently there's questions about security. And especially after the Cambridge Analytica fiasco, I'm sure there's a lot of focus on it. How do you respond?
Well, we've always thought that privacy is part of the core offerings in Truecaller. Everything we've built from the start has been an opt-in feature, and we make it easy for users to opt out. You can even delete or customize your name without being a Truecaller user. So you have the right to be forgotten. All of these things are core things that we built and we launched at a very early stage. I think you need to have that forward-looking thinking around privacy, and not just see where things are right now, but also look at where things are going, and take responsibility for the data that you're collecting. So we, for instance, do not collect any data that we will not use to enhance the user experience inside the app. And it's not even just about enhancing the user experience in the app in forms of ads, but rather it's about using that in specific functionality or features of the app. So, for instance, when you mark a number as spam, if you have location turned on and if you've shared your location with us, we actually use that data to create local regionalized spam top lists, which then get downloaded back to the devices so that they have offline capabilities of detecting spam. So those are some of the really beautiful, smart things that we're doing with the data to give back to the users the experience and the kind of to live up to the expectations that they have of Truecaller. So we've built in those things since early days, and we will continue to work on them and continue to strive to be kind of best in class in that aspect.
Got it. In how many countries is Truecaller predominantly present?
I think it's basically all countries in the world. The ones that we have a major penetration is, you can think of it as a belt, kind of starting from India and then going across to countries in the Middle East, the whole Middle East, and then North Africa and Southern Africa. So all of these countries in this belt, we have a fantastic engagement with our users. There is a similar type of penetration across all these markets. Then there's a couple of different markets, other markets like US, UK, Italy, Sweden, Brazil, where we also have a pretty big user base. But in comparison, most of these countries that I just mentioned stand to be smaller than a country like India or Nigeria, etc., where we have such a big penetration.
So in terms of pecking order, what is India's rank in terms of users?
Number one for sure.
Why do you think so?
Well, I think we focused specifically on India. India was quick on getting onto smartphones, and recent developments with data connectivity and 4G being more accessible here than it is in many other markets, actually, because of pricing, because of the fierce competition among carriers here, has created this huge opportunity. A growth opportunity, not just for, of course, app developers like us, but for the consumers themselves to be able to connect to internet and have their first online experience on their smartphones, as opposed to going through the laptops and the emails and those kind of things. So instead, it's your smartphone, it's your phone number, and that data connectivity and shareability and all those things that phones bring with them.
Got it. Last few set of questions. Who do you admire the most and take a lot of inspiration from?
I think that's a tough question, because there's a lot of people that I admire generally. There's specific startup or if you say business leaders. I think Jeff Bezos is definitely one. The journey that has been made, the kind of grit that he's had, and the kind of culture spread throughout the company is something that is very admirable, I believe. And then you have other people who are not necessarily in tech that we admire a lot. There's business leaders in Sweden that have nothing to do with tech or startups. But when you speak to them, you realize that they're on a totally different level, and you have so much still to learn. And I think what's important is that you try to get close to those people and learn as much as possible.
Sure. You really had my deep respect when I asked you a question on stage. Why haven't you sold it off to big companies like Facebook, Google, for millions of dollars and retire by your own island? What was the answer you gave?
Well, I said we don't intend to sell the company. I think we have a very unique position here in India as a platform, because if you think about the problems that we're solving, there's actually no one else solving these problems. And we're very committed to continuing solving these problems and continuing striving towards building this platform and creating more value for our users. So, there's a lot of safety aspects of it. For instance, in recent reports, we've learned that a lot of women in India, they look up the cab driver's phone number in Truecaller before jumping into the cab. They make sure that it's a verified driver. Now, which other product allows you to do that? And which other product creates that kind of safety and trust with a user? I think we have a very unique position, and we are definitely around to stay.
Thank you for that, and thank you for giving us a product of immense use, and thank you for being an inspiration. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.